Did I grow up in a cult? This is a question I've struggled to answer for a few years now. Many of you already know that I grew up as a missionary kid in a remote part of Indonesia called Papua. Most of my childhood was spent inside a somewhat insular mission community. I lived on a military style base with other missionaries. I went to a missionary run international school with mostly other MKs and spent most of my time hanging out with other missionaries and evangelical Christians. In a video from several years ago, I shared about some of the struggles I faced growing up in this environment. I shared about the trauma I experienced at the hands of my community's strict modesty and purity culture, the fear of the secular outside world that my Bible teacher instilled in me, and my struggle to find my identity after leaving the mission field. Still, I didn't describe my mission community as a cult in that video. And even now, I find myself reluctant to use that word. I'm reluctant for two reasons. First, there were genuine positives to the way I was raised. Growing up, I had opportunities to connect with people from diverse cultures, backgrounds, and faiths, which I believe helped me develop compassion and empathy for those who are different than me. It taught me how to step outside my comfort zone and push through adversities. I also attribute my love for travel and aviation to my upbringing overseas. Secondly, my mission community, it doesn't fit the typical mold of groups often considered cults. There was no Jim Jones-esque charismatic leader, no esoteric rituals, no demands for money in exchange for heavenly rewards. However, the fact that my community offered some positive experiences and didn't look like a cult doesn't mean it wasn't a cult. This fact is something that I'm still coming to terms with. So, in today's video, I'd like to process some of this out loud with you guys to see if I can come to any conclusions about my mission community. To help me understand where my mission community possibly lies on the cult spectrum, I'll be using something called the Cult Compass, which was created by my friend and fellow YouTuber Owen Morgan. Owen is one of my favorite YouTubers. I probably watch one of his videos like every day. He grew up in the Jehovah's Witnesses, has studied cults in depth, and used evidence-based methods in constructing the Cult Compass. So the assessment tool of the Cult Compass actually contains 50 questions which are designed to help you understand your group's dynamics. It also provides a detailed classification of where your group falls on a scale of 1 to 5 and gives you personalized recommendations based on your answers. I actually think this tool is so helpful that I've recommended it to people in my neurodivergent therapy group. Drew's going to help me go through the assessment because I have a feeling that this is going to draw up a lot of emotions for me, so I kind of need somebody to be here with me. I'll be touching on some very personal stuff in this video, and there's no way I'll be able to cover everything, so I'm actually going to do a Discord hangout to talk about this more with anyone interested. I also know that I have quite a few followers who also grew up as MKs, and I'd love to hear your stories about this as well. So this hangout will take place at 7 p.m. Central on September 29th on my American Humanist Association Discord channel. To join the hangout, you will need to be an AHA member, but honestly, you should want to be anyway. Membership connects you with thousands of humanists, exclusive events, and a community that actually gets you. The AHA is basically if the right side of history was an organization, and I don't say this lightly. Membership to an organization like the AHA, an organization that's fighting for our progressive values and equality, is so crucial right now. Recently, the AHA played a key role in welcoming Representative Sarah McBride, who is the first openly transgender member of Congress, to the Congressional Free Thought Caucus, which is dedicated to defending religious freedom and the separation of church and state. The AHA has 235 local groups around the country doing great work, and they have a legal team defending the freedom of atheists, humanists, and some religious minorities. They just won a case in West Virginia against a Catholic school that attempted to use $5 million in taxpayer dollars to fund their religious ministry. I am a proud member of the American Humanist Association because they're on the right side of the history that's being written right now. I know that you guys want to be too, so come join the AHA. Click the link in the description and pinned comment to sign up for membership and join me over on Discord. Thank you so much to the AHA for sponsoring this video. This seriously is a sponsorship that I'm really excited and privileged that I get to put in one of my videos.
Let's get into it.
I'm nervous. I'm so nervous for this.
Originally, Taylor was supposed to do that, but
I can't. My nails are too long.
Apparently,
I can't really flick it.
I'm pretty good at this.
It suits you. All right. So before we jump into the actual assessment, I want to read just how the classification works with this. So it's going to categorize my mission community according to a couple different factors. So one is centralization versus decentralization. Centralized groups have clear hierarchies where authority flows from the top down. Rules and decisions come from leadership and are enforced throughout the organization. Decentralized groups lack formal power structures. Instead, behavior is guided by community expectations, peer pressure, or shared ideology rather than official commands. Then we have focused versus unfocused groups, and focused groups revolve around a specific individual, leader, or very narrow concept. Loyalty and identity center on the singular focus. Unfocused groups may have strong beliefs or missions, but they're not built around worshiping or following one particular person or extremely narrow idea. Okay, so how centralized is the decision-making in your group? I feel like a lot of these questions are going to be kind of hard for me to answer because there wasn't exactly like a hierarchy like in the mission community, because we had the broad mission community, which was made up of a bunch of different like individual mission organizations. And within each organization, there was obviously a hierarchy. And I mean, because they kind of operated as businesses, which is a whole other conversation we can get into. But like, I'm trying to more talk about the mission community as a whole in this video. So I would say like probably mixed.
I think
because of that reason. Like we didn't have like official like leaders of our community, but there were some people that were just assumed to be more in leadership positions because they were missionaries that had been on the island for the longest.
Right.
And like whoever was there for the longest was like viewed as the most authoritative, I guess.
Right.
So I guess we'll do that. How structured is the chain of command in your group? I would say some structure, but flexible. I'm going to kind of answer right in the middle there.
Yeah. I would say that that's actually significantly more democratic and less hierarchical than the community I grew up in, because the community I grew up in was a very strictly defined single church, whereas yours was a conglomerate of different churches and businesses all in one.
And I think that just comes from how the community was shaped in the first place, because it was a conglomeration of all these like different groups and like different missions. And so like there wasn't anyone that was officially the leader. It was more just like people who had been there longer. And we did have a mission church, but there wasn't like a singular pastor.
Right.
The different missionaries would take turns like preaching for that week. How narrow and specific is your group's central focus? I'm kind of torn between general focus with room for variation and specific focus, but some flexibility.
I mean, to me, from what I have observed, I would be actually closer to going with narrow focus on specific beliefs and goals, and specific focus with some flexibility, because the ultimate goal was converting as many people as possible. Just people had very different approaches to doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that comes back to it was a conglomeration of a bunch of different organizations, because we had missionaries from like pretty much every single denomination of Christianity that exists practically. But at the same time, they were all evangelical. Like they were all there to spread the message of God, and kind of with a sense of urgency, because they felt like the end times were near almost. So I don't know. I guess I'll go with specific focus, but some flexibility. How uniform are beliefs and practices across your group? Again, I feel like it was stuck. Core beliefs shared, details vary, and most beliefs shared, some personal interpretation. I mean, probably most beliefs
Yeah.
shared. 'Cause at the end of the day,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. They all believe in a very specific dying and rising God figure, and
Yeah.
they all like subscribe to, the same like religion explicitly, and they all essentially had the same moral code. The variation with that is like whether it's a good idea to drink beer or not like whether or not it's okay to have sex
I
outside
mean,
of marriage.
I think that there were more theological differences than just whether or not you can drink beer. But I think
How
still,
significant were those most of the time, though?
I mean, I don't think that they ever got in the way of us working on our shared goal of converting people.
Yeah.
So, yeah, most beliefs shared because it revolved around the same religion. It's just our personal interpretation of like specific verses or some theological ideas we could have some interpretation there. But at the end of the day, we're like focused on the same thing.
Can women wear pants or not? Like,
Most people would say yes. There were some, like,
some
we
that said
had
no.
some missionaries who were brethren, and they believed in wearing skirts, and
Right.
they looked like little doilies. They weren't like Amish head coverings, but just they had
Dwarf
little
head
tiny
covering?
head coverings, and they weren't allowed to cut their hair
Yeah.
except for trimming it. I feel like I'm glad that you're here to kind of check me on some of these things because I think that sometimes I can kind of look at my past mission community with rose-colored glasses sometimes from the standpoint of like I grew up in it, and so like a lot of the time I'll forget that the experiences that I had or the community that I grew up in it's a very different experience than what a lot of other people go through.
Yeah.
And so to me it's like that doesn't seem abnormal until I say it out loud or I hear somebody else repeat what I just said like back to me.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh shit, that like actually is like kind of weird. How much control does the group have over your daily schedule?
I feel like this one's probably lesser. I mean, I don't think that the mission community dictated you in the way you spent your time any more than the dictates of any kind of group
Normal.
within American culture. I mean, you had to go to school. Sometimes you had to do like chores or work that you got paid for, homework. It was
Yeah.
pretty typical.
I mean, I would say, yeah, they didn't have like rules over what our daily schedule was like per se. I think when I was living in the hostel, because I lived in a dorm at my Christian school for, was it a semester? No, it was a year, a whole year. And then, I mean, there were a lot of rules. I had to like sign in and out whenever I left the dorm.
Yeah.
And I had to ask permission before I watched anything or went on the computer or like went on the internet, which of course I never actually asked for permission. I just did it anyways. But I think that that is somewhat normal. I think the restrictiveness was more than what a typical teenager would experience. But also I was like 14 at the time. So, I mean, being accountable for where I am is a little bit more understandable, I think.
What do you think about several expected activities per week? I would absolutely say that of mine.
Well, here's the thing is that it's not like we were required. Maybe expected is the right word for it. All of the activities we ever did were with the mission community, but that wasn't necessarily like a requirement for us to only do stuff with the mission community. It was like there was no one else to do
You're on an
anything
island.
with. We were like very remote. I mean, of course, interacting with the local people, which, we were encouraged to do. But when it came to like our main socializing and main activities, like they all had to do with the mission community. But again, was that an expectation or just like that was the only option?
What would happen if you stopped going to church and shared religious activities? But
Oh, that would be frowned upon for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. How strictly does your group control appearance and dress? Oh, this one I have opinions on.
For men,
Not at all.
Not really at all.
The guys could basically wear underwear.
Yeah.
Like there were no like rules for them at all. When it came to what women could wear, like we could wear pants, but we couldn't wear anything that was very form-fitting, and it seemed like if you happened to be a girl that was a little bit more curvy, which I was, and so was my sister and a lot of my friends, then you like, the restrictions on you were even, like, tighter
Yeah.
because you were showing too much curve, and that could, like, entice the boys or whatever.
Yeah.
So I would say detailed dress codes enforced.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say strict uniform because we didn't have like a uniform we'd have to wear, but we had very, very strict modesty
Yeah.
culture for sure. How much say does your group have in where and with whom you live?
I think that's a hard one for you to answer because you were a teenager and you had to live with your parents. You depended on that.
Yeah, not thinking of it from that perspective, though. We did, for the majority of the time we were missionaries, live on a mission base, which was like basically like a military base where everybody else is fellow missionaries. So, but again, that's not, there are like places where missionaries don't live on bases. So it wasn't necessarily that we had to, it was just that happened to be the case.
Yeah.
I would say might suggest living near members.
Seems fair.
Probably. How much does your group control what and when you eat? I don't think that there were any dietary rules.
I mean, I would consider alcohol in this personally.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And I mean, maybe there were some ideas about that. They were a little stricter than the average.
I would say that they were stricter than the average. Most missionaries did not drink alcohol and kind of frowned upon it. But then there were a few missionaries that came from Europe, and Europe has a very different culture around that, and they like brewed their own beer. And all of the American missionaries were kind of like, we don't really like that, but also that's kind of their culture, so we're not going to make a big deal about it. There were some missionaries who were part of the Seventh-day Adventists, and they are vegetarian, but that didn't really apply to us. So I would say no dietary rules.
Okay.
How much control does your group exercise over sexual and romantic behavior? Strict rules with monitoring.
Yeah.
Not complete control over relationships, but we did have a very strong purity culture, and, you know, sex before marriage, obviously, was kind of forbidden. So in our mission community, the missionaries who were like adults were referred to as like aunt and uncle. So they were kind of like given this almost familial role to a lot of the younger like MKs. And they would definitely like monitor what all of us would do. And like one time I got in trouble for holding hands with my boyfriend. And one time I got in trouble for making out in a public place where they could see. I was about to say, which I can understand getting in trouble for, but actually, no. That's weird. Why would I get in trouble for that? That's stupid.
I mean, making out in a public place, as in the
School.
the middle of like, yeah, in a public place, as in a park, away from other people, but within eyesight, maybe.
I was.
Versus in the middle of like a crowded gymnasium. There's a difference.
That's true. I was in the Pondok, and it was after school. Nobody was really there. You know which Pondok I'm talking about? Because it's the one.
That means gazebo.
Oh, yeah. Gazebo. It's the one that, like, from the library, you can kind of see it. Okay. Yeah. The librarian saw us. And then the guy I was making out with, his dad was the principal of the school. And so we got pulled into his, like, office and got a talking to. And now that I think, I at the time, I remember feeling really embarrassed and really feeling like I did something wrong. And I haven't really thought about that situation since. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I mean, maybe we could have been more discreet, I guess. But like, we had like a big conversation about how like what we did was not appropriate for us just dating, and the fact that we weren't married.
Yeah. I mean, I got that talking to at school with one of my platonic female friends because I put my leg up on her lap while we were studying without thinking about it. But, I mean, yeah, I would definitely say strict rules with monitoring because you should not have been shamed for that.
Yeah. How much approval is required from leadership for major life decisions? I would say expected to consult leadership. But again, this is one that's kind of hard for me to really answer because I was a child at the time. And obviously children are going to go to their parents or just other people that they view as authority figures for advice on stuff. So, how restricted is access to outside news, books, and media? Again, I feel like this is one that's kind of difficult for me to answer because we were in such a remote part of Indonesia that for the first couple years that we were there, like we had internet, but it was really, really unreliable. It would go down for like several days at a time. And then when it was working, it was so slow that like you couldn't really access things very easily.
Yeah.
So I felt like I was very cut off from American culture because of that. But also, was it restricted? I wouldn't say it was restricted. I would say discouraged, especially when it came to stuff that could be challenging of the Christian faith. I wasn't told that I couldn't read those kind of things or look at those kind of things, but also to like use discernment. And I was told that sometimes like opening a door into that world can end up leading you away from Christianity or causing you to have doubts about your faith. So I would say it was discouraged.
Yeah.
So many sources discouraged probably. How does your group handle exposure to criticism or negative coverage? Here's the thing for this one is that I honestly didn't hear a lot of the criticism. I feel like I hear a lot more criticism about missionaries now, and
Yeah.
I'm very critical of mission work now. But growing up, I didn't hear that criticism, and that could have been an effect of I was never around anyone who would be critical of it.
Yeah.
Remember, like,
I mean, also because a lot of it would have been withheld from you. I mean, that's a potential reason.
Well, and before my parents went over to the mission field, we did have some family members who were definitely like very left on the political spectrum, were atheists themselves, and were critical of my parents' decision to go into mission work. And I think expressed that or
Yeah.
had conversations with my parents about that. But because I was a child, I never really heard those conversations. And like my family members never brought that to me.
Yeah.
So, well, and if I think of like if I had heard criticism or if people were being critical of my mission community, I think that they would have like heavily countered it or tried to explain why what they're doing actually is morally right.
Yeah.
And so
I mean-
I would say almost strong warnings against criticism.
Okay.
Because like I feel like I didn't hear criticism very much, but if I had, I know that my mission community would have like rationalized it somehow or
Yeah.
tried to explain to like make sure that I didn't feel some type of way about it.
Yeah. Or use their critics as a moral example of failure,
Yeah.
like happened many times in
Oh, yeah, that's
school
true.
classes.
Yeah, I think there's a question further on that I might talk about that a little bit. Oh, this one. How restricted is contact with former members who left? So we weren't restricted from having contact, but there were some people from my like mission school, which everybody in my Christian mission school was pretty much other missionary kids. Like we did have some that weren't missionary kids, but I would say like 95% of them were missionary kids. And we did have some people graduate from my school and then like end up either leaving Christianity or becoming very progressive with their beliefs and were inclusive of LGBT people or LGBT themselves. And those people, those alumni were used as examples in my school of like what not to do. And they told us like when we graduate and go back to our home countries, which most of us were going back to the US, that we needed to be careful to not become too worldly and embrace. Specifically, it had to do with like the LGBT community.
Yeah.
So, I wouldn't say that we weren't allowed to talk to those people that left, but it was definitely like strongly discouraged, I think. How much are you required to report your activities and thoughts to superiors? I would say with this one, it's kind of hard for me to answer because I was a child, but I would say for the adults in my community, I don't think that you had to report your activities, but if you had thoughts that ran contrary to Christianity or something, or had doubts about Christianity or had doubts about mission work or something, you were expected to like talk to people about that.
Yeah.
I feel like the way that this word is making it really hard for me to like answer this because it's not that they would have to like give a report or something.
I feel like there's a middle ground between occasional casual check-ins and regular meetings expected.
Because it's like there weren't like meetings in that sense, but well, I mean, there were base meetings, but that had more to do with a specific mission organization talking
Yeah.
about like logistics. And my parents worked for a mission aviation organization. So like they would have base meetings, but they would just talk about like flying.
Yeah.
um
Occasional casual check-ins seems reasonable.
yeah, I would say I would really put it some like where in the middle here, because it wasn't necessarily occasional and it was kind of like expected.
Yeah, it was frequent, but also informal, right?
Yeah, frequent but informal. And that's kind of the thing with a lot of this stuff, is that like sometimes things aren't necessarily like a requirement or like written down like this is an expectation, but you're heavily like shamed into doing it, if that makes sense. How often are you required to confess thoughts, feelings, or misconduct? I would say if you have like thoughts or feelings or do something that goes against their idea and understanding of Christianity and like what it means to be a good Christian, then yeah, you're expected to confess that.
Yeah.
So regular confession expected. How much are members encouraged to report on each other's behavior?
That's what they do for fun.
Yeah, and I feel like that was kind of the culture of the mission community, is that everybody, because it was such a small, like close-knit community, that everybody was in everybody else's business. And there's that verse in the Bible that talks about how you're supposed to go to your brother first about something he did wrong, but if he's not listening, then you have to take it to like the elders in your community.
Yeah.
And they very much practice that for sure. Regular reporting expected. Spy on everyone constantly. I almost want to say spy on everyone constantly. But it's not that like there was some leader that was saying you need to spy on everyone. It's just that everybody knew everyone else's business.
Yeah.
Just because we were all around each other all the time.
Yeah.
I guess I won't go that extreme.
Yeah, that seems about right.
How welcome are questions about core beliefs or leadership decisions?
I feel like core beliefs, they're not actually welcome at all, but leadership decisions is a different category, right?
I'm just gonna not answer leadership decisions because I feel like, again, that's like a really hard thing because I was a child, that's a little bit harder thing for me to grapple with.
Yeah.
But when it comes to core beliefs, I would say that they would say that they are welcoming of questions and it's okay to have doubts.
As long as you come back to continuing to believe what we believe.
Right.
Yeah.
You're allowed to ask the question. But if you come to an answer that they don't like, then suddenly your questioning is wrong.
Yeah.
So questioning seen as weakness, I would just put it as that, even though it's not that like the act of questioning was a weak thing to do. But if you came to a conclusion that they didn't like, then that was seen as weak.
Yeah. I mean, if you came to a conclusion they didn't like, I would say that did bring social punishment. Just not
Social
anything
punishment,
formal.
yeah.
So, yeah.
How are alternative viewpoints or competing ideas treated? Other views are evil, actually. I was about to say other views are wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, within that form of Christianity, you're taught that every other religious belief or ideology or worldview is literally from the devil. And even though we all came from different denominations of Christianity, that belief was something that pretty much every single missionary had, to the point that when missionaries entered the island, I mean, all of the people there had their own indigenous religious beliefs. They were like a very animistic kind of culture. And the missionaries basically told the people that they're worshiping demons and that their indigenous beliefs are demonic.
Yeah.
And that is something that mission community, I mean, I've been out of it for over 10 years now, so I can't really speak to what it's like now. But definitely when I left, that was still a belief that they all held, with that the Papuans' indigenous beliefs were actually demonic. And
I mean, that's why you're there in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we're missionaries. Of course. That's like why we're there.
Yeah.
How much does your group promote us versus them and black and white thinking? I mean, absolute good versus evil, because they really did believe in this like supernatural battle between God and Satan. So I think that I would say that they believed in absolute good versus evil.
They didn't necessarily say that everyone outside of the group was absolute evil. And they also didn't say everyone inside the group was absolute good. They definitely didn't say that. But they did say that the battle they were waging was one of complete black and white, absolute good, absolute evil, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Do you think what I'm putting it at is a little too strong?
I mean, it depends on how you interpret the question. I feel like that can be fair because, again, that's the reason you're there, because you believe that fighting the Papuans' own indigenous culture is the reason why you're there. You're fighting absolute pure evil, while not saying that the Papuans themselves are pure evil, just their beliefs and everything about the way that they live.
But again, I mean, yeah, like they wouldn't say the Papuans are evil, but if you're saying that their culture and who they are, their identity is evil, then you basically are saying that they're evil.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stick with it. How much are you taught techniques to stop unwanted thoughts or doubts? I would say must stop doubts, because there was that expectation that like it's okay to have doubts, but you can't let your doubts go too far, basically.
Yeah.
How much does your group use special terminology that outsiders don't understand?
That's funny.
I mean, I would say that they use pretty extensive jargon. I've seen religious groups that are a lot worse, where it's completely incomprehensible. But I think that anyone that grew up in evangelical Christianity can probably relate to, having this people refer to it as Christianese. I don't like to use that term because it is a little bit, has like a racist undertone to it. But there is kind of this language of evangelicalism that a lot of people use.
Yeah.
And that was definitely employed by my mission community. How much pressure is there to maintain only positive thoughts about the group?
I do feel like there was so much self-criticism and reporting of other people that, to me, I would rank this as more like it's okay for there to be a little bit more criticism. I mean, what do you think about that?
I think that criticism was allowed, but only to the extent that you're not questioning the main reason that they're there.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Or maybe the power structure involved.
Yeah. I would just say negativity discouraged probably for that one. How much fear or anxiety is there about leaving the group? So it was kind of expected that we were all going to graduate and go back to the US, but under the impression that going back to the US meant that you're staying within their particular brand of Christianity. And a lot of the people that I graduated with ended up going like to the same college.
Yeah.
And it was a college that a lot of other missionaries or missionary kids go to. And then quite a few of my people that were in my class ended up going back to Indonesia and are there working as missionaries again.
How do you factor in the idea of hell into this?
Oh, I was thinking from like leaving the mission community, not necessarily leaving Christianity.
Depends on how you want to interpret it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've interpreted it at other places as like Christianity. So I'll go with terror of consequences. How much guilt and shame used to control behavior? I wanted to put it as constant manipulation, but I don't think it was anyone actively manipulating other people, but heavy guilt and shame for sure. Guilt and shame were like the thing that kind of controlled my entire mission community. And I think for most evangelical Christians, shame is your like motivating factor for like everything you do in your life. So yeah, I would say heavy guilt and shame. How much does a group create extreme emotional highs and lows? I don't think that they ever really created emotional highs and lows.
Hey, you were leading worship, so you would be, I feel like, in a good position to judge.
I wasn't really thinking about that. I mean, yeah, we did worship. We had chapel every single week. We went to church every Sunday. And then we went on like OE every year. Like we had this 2-week like field trip kind of that we went to every year called outdoor education. And we usually go to a more interior village and do a bunch of VBS kind of stuff. And there were extreme emotional highs and lows. I mean, there was one time when we were trying to show the like Jesus movie to a bunch of the locals, and then our generator that we were using to show the movie like wouldn't work. And then everybody interpreted that as a sign that Satan is trying to prevent us from showing that movie.
Yeah.
And we were all, I remember after that, we ended up getting the movie to play. But after that, it was like me and a bunch of other people, and we're like singing songs and like very emotional about the fact that like Satan was trying to, like he was going to battle with us basically in this very real, tangible way, we felt like. So there's that. And then also just the environment that we were in, being around so many like pilots, and that being like most of the mission organizations were aviation related actually in Papua. And there were, flying in Papua is very, very dangerous because of the terrain. It's extremely mountainous there. And there were 4 pilots that died in my mission community when I was there. One of them was my sister's boyfriend's dad that died. One of them was a guy that died, and he was in my parents' mission organization. I mean, I don't know if that's like creating extreme emotional highs and lows, but at the same time, the effect of where we were kind of caused those emotional highs and lows. And like missionaries shouldn't be there to begin with. I don't know. Some variation. I'm just going to go in the middle. I don't know. How much does treatment vary between excessive love and complete rejection? I wouldn't say that my mission community really love bombed people in the same way that I know like Jehovah's Witnesses do or Mormons do. I mean, if you left the faith, they would probably reject you. I'll just go with some inconsistency for this one.
Okay.
How are relationships with non-members viewed and treated? You were allowed to have relationships with people that weren't in the mission community. And I think it was even kind of suggested that you have relationships with the local people. But at the same time, they didn't want you to have your main relationships be those people because they might not be Christian, and you're supposed to have your main social like support system be other Christians.
Right.
I would put that in the middle. Accepted, but with caveats.
Yeah.
How dependent are members on the group for emotional support and identity? I would put that high dependency. As I just said, you're supposed to have your main support system be the mission community, and you are literally told that your identity is in Christ. So I wouldn't say it's complete dependency, like everything 100%, but definitely high dependency. What percentage of your social circle consists of group members?
I like this question. This seems like a precise one that is more
data driven.
Yeah.
This one actually still is kind of hard for me to answer because my social circle was only group members pretty much. I mean, we talked to and hung out with some locals here and there, but it pretty much was other people in the mission community. But again, that was like the only people that we had, and our entire life was in the mission community. 60 to 85%, I would say. How much pressure is there to spend most free time in group activities? We had a lot of activities for sure that had to do with the mission community because, we went to school at a mission school. Our like extracurricular, like playing sports was with other missionaries. Our church was with other missionaries, but you could also have your own free time too. Like you could have like downtime away from the rest of the mission community. It wasn't expected that you have no free time to yourself. I'll put some expectations.
Yeah, seems fair.
How special or chosen does your group consider itself compared to others? Only true path.
I mean, yeah. If
Yeah,
you
because
don't,
if
you're
you're
gonna go to hell.
right, yeah. How are former members who left the group viewed and treated?
Are you looking at between viewed very negatively and enemies, evil, dangerous?
Yeah, because I don't know if they would fully say that they're enemies. Like, and then the one example that I already gave of the alumni who left, and then I don't know if they completely left Christianity or just became a progressive Christian, but they weren't necessarily an enemy, but they were considered dangerous.
Right. Like they probably wouldn't be considered, they wouldn't be said to be evil, but dangerous. Like, yeah, it's dangerous to hang out with them. Don't do it.
I'm going to put it at that. How much financial contribution is expected or required? So, I mean, we had church where, it's very typical for evangelical churches or just Christian churches in general to have an offering time during the service. And you're expected to give something here and there, but anything larger to the like community at large, that was like not a thing.
Yeah.
So I'll put occasional small donations. How transparent is the group about how money is used?
I have no information on this. I don't know.
This one is a little bit hard because, again, I'm talking about the mission community, not about individual mission organizations. And like, it didn't really operate as one entity where like money was taken and distributed in some fashion. I'll just say complete transparency just to give them the benefit of the doubt. How do leaders' lifestyles compare to regular members? So again, with leaders, it's, not that people were designated as leaders, but we kind of look to the missionaries that have been on the island for a longer time, kind of as leaders of the community, and they had the exact same lifestyle as everyone else. So
what about the people who had been like on the island the longest and were considered like kind of the OG missionaries?
I mean, I think that they had the same lifestyle. I don't think that they lived any differently. When I'm thinking of like lifestyle, I'm thinking about like their house.
Yeah. I mean, I do know of a couple of missionaries in your mission community who have a house that if it were in the US, it would definitely be, costing a couple $1 million.
Yeah, but that's kind of a different situation because, first of all, those missionaries weren't the ones that had been on the island longer. They actually came at the same time that my family did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And you guys had a pretty
normal
standard house.
Yeah. I had an issue with that because their house was so extravagant and it was like built up on this hill overlooking the rest of, because, we lived in a city.
Yeah.
Well, for part of the time I was in Indonesia, we basically lived in a village. But then the other part of the time was in this kind of like larger city. And this family like built this huge house, which was a lot bigger than most Indonesians' homes.
Yeah.
On top of a hill overlooking the rest of the city as though they're like some like king or something. I found that like very distasteful.
But they weren't like leaders, really.
They weren't really leaders.
Okay.
No. What happens if you can't meet financial expectations? I'm going to just say full understanding just to give them the benefit of the doubt because I don't really know.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like if anything, the missionaries were probably more generous with each other financially than,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it kind of took care of each other's needs when they could.
I mean, money kind of wasn't like a big consideration. And I think a lot of the missionaries were kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum where they thought like having money was kind of a bad thing.
Yeah, that's something I actually kind of like about there.
Except for those missionaries I was just talking about,
Right.
building the huge
Yeah.
house on top of the hill. How accountable are leaders to members for their decisions and actions? I would say generally accountable.
I definitely think that men got away with more
Yeah,
than women did. But I'm not sure. From what I know, it's hard to say like little accountability because I certainly have heard stories of people being penalized for doing things that anybody would consider bad.
Yeah. How much are leaders presented as infallible or specially inspired? I would go with highly respected because I think that some of the people that ended up being in leadership positions, I think that they could be questioned or held accountable, but at the same time, they were kind of viewed as having like more wisdom than I think other people.
Like a spiritual gift that other people may not possess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What happens to members who break important group rules? So for me, when I see this question, I am thinking about rules about modesty and purity because that, as a teenager growing up in that community, that was like the rules that I engaged with the most.
Yeah.
And there were pretty, I would say, serious consequences. I mean, we weren't physically abused or anything like that, but we were definitely given a very strong like talking down to and told that we're doing something that makes God sad, which is kind of like the worst thing that you can possibly tell somebody. What are the consequences for wanting to leave the group? Okay, if we're thinking about this from like the Christian perspective, ruin, because you're going to go to hell.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. What about like social consequences?
Social consequences, again, I think you would be considered like the alumni that left as someone that's dangerous potentially.
Yeah, that's true.
And should be like handled with gloves.
Yeah.
So how should I look at this then?
I don't know. I mean, I'd say go with your gut instinct on it. If you don't feel like it's that strong, then don't. But if you feel like it is, then do it.
I'm going to do major consequences.
That's the whole reason you're there.
How much pressure is there to recruit friends and family? Mandatory recruitment. We were missionaries. That was our entire livelihood, was recruiting other people into Christianity, including friends and family, but mostly the local people.
Yeah.
How much information about beliefs and expectations is revealed to newcomers? I feel like this one's hard for me to answer because, like, newcomer to the mission community, I wouldn't really know because I was a child.
Yeah.
Newcomer to that form of Christianity, I would say that there are some things that are kind of withheld until that person is more firm in their faith, is kind of what they would say.
Yeah.
I would say I'm just going to go with mostly transparent.
Yeah, that feels fair.
How much does the group target vulnerable individuals for recruitment?
Oh my God. That's why you're in Papua. You should tell them about the going to the ends of the earth thing.
Going to the ends of the earth.
Yeah, like, there's that whole doctrine about like Jesus will come back when we'll reach the ends of the
I
earth.
mean, yeah, that was the thing that those missionaries thought and believed, was that they had to do this. And Papua, Indonesia, is one of the most remote places in the entire world. There are uncontacted tribes in Papua still.
Yeah.
And so it's considered ends of the earth. So the missionaries thought that taking the gospel to Papua meant that, as soon as all of the Papuans have heard the gospel, then Jesus is coming back.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say exploit vulnerable only, because they want to share the gospel with anybody, whether or not they're vulnerable. But do they actively target people that are vulnerable? 100%.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of the one time that we went on OE, and part of our outdoor education experience, we had a dentist come along with us, and he would give like dental procedures to people in the village that a lot of the time they had rotting teeth that needed to be pulled. And he would sit a patient down in his dental chair, a patient that probably had multiple rotting teeth. And before, what happens with rotting teeth is that it causes extreme like jaw pain and even like migraines and stuff. So there are people that are potentially in like a lot of pain.
Yeah.
And he would sit them down and ask them if they know Jesus, and wouldn't start the procedure until they answered yes. Or if they answered no, then he would like share the gospel with them. And kind of a lot of the time, what I noticed as somebody that for some reason enjoyed pulling teeth, which maybe is something I need to reflect on a little bit about my personality, but I was very much observing a lot of what would happen. And most of them said yes because I think they just thought that was what they were supposed to say, and that they want to get their tooth pulled. So of course they're going to say that. But I think that illustrates that there was some very actively, not just targeting people that are emotionally vulnerable, because that's something that pretty much all the missionaries did on the regular.
Yeah.
But targeting people that are physically vulnerable, which is even more detestable maybe. How much deception is used in recruitment or retention? I wouldn't say that they were deceiving people, because the missionaries genuinely believed that that's what they needed to do to save people and prevent them from going to hell.
Yeah.
I hesitate to say complete honesty, because I'm sure...
You said that they did withhold some things.
Yeah. I'll just say very honest. How often does your group emphasize urgent end times or crisis scenarios? Constant urgency. Again, I think that was the reason we were there, is because we thought that if we brought the message to the most remote part of the world, that Jesus would come back.
Yeah.
So there was this sense of urgency, we need to do this now. We need to save souls. We need to bring about God's kingdom. So I would say constant urgency for sure. Man, these are intense. How exclusive is your group's path to salvation, success, or enlightenment? Only way possible.
Yeah.
They were evangelical Christians. They thought you had to be Christian or else bad things were going to happen to you. How urgent is the timeline for your group's mission or goals? Emergency action now, for sure. What role does your group believe it plays in world transformation?
Yeah.
You think the key to everything?
I mean, sharing the gospel to people. I mean, do they focus? Yeah. Do they focus on political problems? Do they focus? I mean, they do focus on infrastructure problems. I will give them that. And medevac and things like that. That's great. but they believe that that is done in order to share the gospel with people.
Right.
They believe that the only way that to solve any problem in the entire world is just to give people the magic experience of accepting Jesus, and then instantly you will change and everything will be great and you'll be able to get along with other people. There will be no violence, no war, no corruption ever again.
I guess I was thinking about it from like the standpoint of they didn't think that they were the only group that was pushing this mission forward. I think that they would say missionaries around the world were
Yeah.
also, but still, I mean, yeah, the key to everything.
Oh, wow. 13 of 13.
Oh, shit.
Apocalyptic and mission focus analysis. Your section score, 13 of 13.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's apocalyptic and mission focus. Yeah.
That's what you guys were.
Yeah. I mean, that's literally what we were. It's like the definition of a missionary. How much does the group monitor or control your social media activity? When we were there, social media was just becoming a thing. I think Facebook was the only thing that was around. And when I lived in the dorm, there was definitely close monitoring of that because we had to ask to use the internet. And like our computer room was like where with everybody else and like everybody could see what you were doing. But that was kind of like a different situation. I would say some guidelines. This is interesting, actually. How dependent is the group on social media algorithms for validation and growth? And this is interesting to me just because, again, when I was a missionary, like social media was barely a thing.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know how the different mission organizations are using social media now. I don't really know.
Yeah.
Should I answer it from when I was there or what I think that they would do now?
Probably what you think they would do now.
Probably very I would say active on social. All right, so these are my results. I was in a high control group. That's not really very surprising to me. This group exhibits controlling characteristics that may limit personal freedom. Recommendations: consider limiting involvement if possible, maintain connections outside the group, seek support from trusted friends and professionals. I really like that he included this like recommendation because I feel like it gives people something to do after they get this assessment and like a direction to go in. Obviously, I ended up leaving that mission community because I graduated and have since left Christianity and have been very critical of my mission community since on my YouTube channel. You know, another thing about this assessment is that it doesn't, from what I understand, it doesn't use the word cult in your assessment results. And I actually think that that is something that's probably important because what cult means, like cult is a very like fluid word, and sometimes that can mean something that's like a group that's very innocuous. Like there are like fandoms or like makeup brands or movies that are considered to be cults or their followings considered to be cults.
Yeah.
And then there are groups like Scientology that are like actually dangerous, that are called cults. So what I think is the most important from this is not actually calling it a cult, but identifying the different factors that could be problematic, which is really what it has done.
Yeah.
But I am curious because I know that I do have a lot of followers that grew up in evangelical Christianity, and I actually do have quite a few followers that are like fellow ex-MKs.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if you guys take this assessment, what results do you get? I would really like to hear about that in the comments. I do want to make sure that I shout out Owen Morgan because like I said at the beginning of this video, he was the one that created this cult compass. And I really do think it's a super cool tool to be able to kind of analyze your group to see where the problematic stuff might be. So shout out to him. Go check out his channel, check out the Cult Compass, and yeah. And also, you guys, be sure to check out the AHA and become a member so that you can join me on my Discord. Thank you so much for watching, and a huge thank you to my patrons who help make these videos possible. If you like this video, please be sure to subscribe and ring the bell. If you'd like to follow me on social media, my Instagram is Taylor_the_Antibot. And if you'd like to support this channel financially, a link to my Patreon will be down in the description, and we'll see you on the next one. Say bye.